Mass production and the stock market boom. So we know already that there was an economic boom in the 1920s because of the impact of World War I on America. So firstly, none of the battles in World War I were fought in the USA, so the USA had to pay no war damage, and the USA was in full employment during the war, so it meant that people were economically prosperous. This also meant that there was a lot of cheap labor because a lot of immigrants were coming from war-ravaged countries to come to America to search for the American dream. So immigrants came to America and they were desperate for work because there were so many of them coming to America to work, so employers could exploit them for lower wages and horrible working conditions. So this created a boom because businesses could reduce their costs, and in turn they could reduce prices for consumers. There's also a lot of natural resources in America, such as oil, coal, wool, and iron. So that contributed to the boom because they had more stuff to produce from. There's also the spread of electricity and technology. So people had electricity in their homes now, so they will buy electrically powered goods such as vacuums, fridges, radios, and this was just increase the level of consumerism. So this also meant that advertising was on the rise. So usually advertising was only based on posters, but now in the 1920s it happened on radios, billboards, and it was still on posters, of course. So now advertising was on the rise, and people took classes on the psychology of advertising to make businesses advertising more effective for consumers, which increased consumption. There's also Henry Ford and the mass production. So Henry Ford was one of the first people who implemented mass production to their production. So they firstly introduced division of labor. So one person would do one small task for a big job. So if they had to create a car, then one person would put in the tire, one person would paint the car. So this reduced the time it took because one person didn't need to do everything himself, and increased efficiency because people just had to do one job and they could be specialized at it. The production time was cut even shorter with the introduction of the assembly line. So this was a moving conveyor belt that moved across workers, so workers just had to stand still and do their job when the car went to their position. So this decreased time even more because now workers didn't even need to move, so they could just assemble what the part and the job that they had to do, and this decreased production time. So before, for the multi-Ford, from 12 hours to assemble a single car, now it was reduced down to 1 hour and 33 minutes. This is also because the multi-Ford was standardized, so there was only one color, which is black. So one of the reasons why it was black was so it's faster to dry, which cut down production time even more. And for the economic boom, there was also hire purchase. So before the war, there were businesses that offered schemes such as you have to pay on a monthly basis, and it's usually higher than the provided cost. So people often did not take this before the war because it was seen as a poor thing to do, because it looked like you didn't have the money to buy it, but you still wanted to buy it, so you were looked down upon as if you were poor, and it was looked down upon as you were debt. But after the war, it wasn't that shameful anymore, and people started using hire purchase to buy the goods that they wanted to buy, and it was also a benefit for firms because they would have interest on top of the original price. So it was a good risk for the firms themselves. there was also the rise of the stock market. So the stock basically meant that you had shareholders who have shares on a percentage of a share on a firm. So this meant that people could buy shares to have a certain amount of control of a firm, and they could enjoy the profits that they earned. But people started using this to gain profit because stocks slowly rose in price, so people started to buy on the margin. So basically this meant that they would simply buy shares just to sell them at a higher price so you gain profit after they loaned it. So people start doing this a lot, such as they just loan from banks to get money just to buy shares, and over time, after say like 3 months, and if it will rise in price, the people who took the risk in the first place could sell their shares back to the market, and the people who took out the loans could return the loans to the banks with a set amount of interest, but overall they would usually gain a lot of profit from doing this. So this was quite dangerous because people often forgot that stock prices could decrease as well as increase. Also, not everyone benefited during the roaring 20s. So new synthetic materials were found, such as rayon, which meant that farmers who grew cotton and wool were often surpassed or made redundant because of these new synthetic materials. So cotton and wool became obsolete because many clothes were now made from new synthetic materials such as rayon. So farmers would then get increasingly poorer because their materials were no longer needed. So older industries such as coal mining, shipbuilding, and railways started to decline because they couldn't really benefit from the mass production, because these are industries that could not benefit from using the assembly line. During the war, these industries were in full production because, of course, you needed coal to power your appliances, and you needed ships to transport your goods throughout the world. But after the war, these slowly declined because, firstly, isolationism, so people didn't really need to export out anymore, and secondly, there was no war, so people often focus on the economic boom within America. So also, you also know that in Prohibition, it reduced demand for grapes and barley, which is used to make wine and beer. So farmers were most often proven obsolete because they had to reduce their operations, and farmer costs were high because they could not use mechanization. Also, lower paid workers did not benefit from the economic boom because these workers were often exploited by the employers for lower wages and horrible working conditions. So these workers could not really benefit from the economic boom because they couldn't buy the products in the first place. These included black people and immigrants.